This time let's talk about the sciatic nerve. So the sciatic nerve is formed from the sacral plexus, the L4, the L5, the S1, the S2, and the S3 segments to be exact. Now the sciatic nerve has, this one over here has two parts to it, a tibial part and a common peroneal part. Now the tibial part is formed from the ventral divisions of L4, L5, S1, S2 and S3 spinal roots, whereas the common peroneal part is formed from the dorsal divisions of L4, L5, S1 and S2. And so basically the sciatic nerve has two parts to it connected by deep fascia. So the sciatic nerve is basically previously in the pelvis, right? And what are the relations of the sciatic nerve in the pelvis? In the pelvis, the sciatic nerve lies in front of the piriformis. In over here in this diagram, this is the piriformis muscle, right? And this is a posterior view. Hopefully you also get that. So the one part that cannot be seen would be the anterior part of the piriformis, and this part that we can see is the posterior. Again, this is the posterior view of the thigh. So in the pelvis, this sciatic nerve lies in front of the piriformis muscle. And how does the sciatic nerve enter the thigh? My apologies, enters the gluteal region. So the sciatic nerve enters the gluteal region from the pelvis via the greater sciatic notch, and it passes through the greater sciatic notch beneath the piriformis muscle. So it enters the gluteal region via the greater sciatic notch underneath the piriformis muscle. In this diagram, it is a bit more easier to see because this is the pelvic bone. This here is the greater sciatic notch, which is made by this part, which is a foramen, and these ligaments, which have not been named, but which convert the greater sciatic foramen into a notch. So the sciatic nerve basically enters into the gluteal region from the pelvis. So this is the anterior view. So this part, the part that is sort of like ahead of this part is the pelvis. So previously it is in the pelvis. It enters into the gluteal region found at the back via this foramen and beneath the piriformis muscle. And as for where the piriformis is, it basically has its origin in this, an attachment at the apex. So it will kind of be like this and this, and so basically it will kind of like be covering the foramen, and there will be part of the foramen above the piriformis, part of the foramen below the piriformis, and the part that is below, it will basically enter via that part. So what we are talking about now, that the sciatic nerve has entered into the gluteal region, it will have certain relationships. It will be anterior to certain things and posterior to certain others. It will be that is anterior to the sciatic nerve. We will have certain muscles, namely the superior gemellus, the obturator internus, and just the tendon, because the actual flat belly of the obturator internus is present in the pelvis and not the gluteal region. And then we have the one that is below, that is the inferior gemellus. Then the sciatic nerve will pass over this muscle, that is the quadratus femoris, right? And then it will reach basically the adductor magnus. This part, just the upper part of the adductor magnus, which we also call as the ischial part. And below this level, right, so one more thing. In this basically the gluteus maximus has been dissected. If it were present, it would have been like this. So in this region, the gluteal region, that is posterior to it, that is posterior to the sciatic nerve, we will have the gluteus maximus and the posterior cutaneous nerve of the thigh. And at the level of having crossed the adductor magnus upper part, that is the level where the gluteus maximus lower border would have been. And below the lower border of the gluteus maximus, the sciatic nerve enters into the thigh. And it enters into the thigh by passing deep to a muscle, that is the long head of the biceps femoris. Over here it has slightly been pulled, retracted, so that we can see the sciatic nerve, otherwise it would have been covering it in this part. So it enters the thigh by passing deep to the biceps femoris, and the biceps femoris kind of crosses the sciatic nerve in its part. Then the sciatic nerve kind of goes downwards. In the thigh, the sciatic nerve has certain relationships. Lateral to the sciatic nerve, there will be the long head of the biceps femoris, as you can see. Medial to it, over here we will have the semimembranosus, and sitting on top of the semimembranosus we will have the semitendinosus. Lateral to the sciatic nerve in the thigh, we will have the semimembranosus, and on top of it the semitendinosus, and lateral to it we will have the biceps femoris, and in parts over it we will also have this again. So what about all of the branches? So this sciatic nerve does not give any branch in the gluteal region, right? That is an important point to remember. So it does give an articular branch to the hip bone. There are plenty of muscular branches, for example to the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, the long head of the biceps femoris, among other muscles in the region. One muscle I forgot is basically this one that it crosses before it enters into the thigh, that is the ischial head of the adductor magnus. And so these four muscles, that is the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, over here the ischial part of the adductor magnus, and the long head of the biceps femoris, these are supplied by the tibial part of the sciatic nerve. There is also another muscle, that is the short head of the biceps femoris, this one over here, and you can even see the branches coming from this direction. And this is the only muscle that is supplied by the common peroneal part. Even if you look really carefully, you should know that the tibial part of the sciatic nerve is the one that is facing medially, and the fibular part or the common peroneal part is the one that is facing laterally. And you can see these branches, this branch coming out from the medial side that supplies the semitendinosus, and this one that supplies the biceps femoris, and this one that supplies the semimembranosus. And as for the adductor magnus, there is probably a branch that is not quite seen over here, whereas the one for the short head can be seen to come from the lateral side. So hopefully if you see a diagram, it is easy for you to remember all of this, all of the relationships, all of the articulations, and etc. Hopefully you found this to be helpful. If you do, please like, subscribe, and leave a